This video will be looking at the SQA revision support provided for the Applications of Maths National 5 in 2022. It is brought to you by the Forth Valley and West Lothian Regional Improvement Collaborative. The learning intention of this video is to review the SQA revision support for the National 5 Applications of Maths exam 2022 and to note key revision areas and topics as specified by the SQA in their additional support. Success criteria of this video. I am aware of the provided SQA revision support for National 5 Applications of Maths in areas to be assessed as specified by the SQA, and I have identified areas and topics that I will focus my revision on. Throughout the lesson, you'll see various symbols on the slides to indicate what you should be doing. Here are the symbols which may be used, so familiarise yourself with them before moving on. So in response to COVID and the impact that has had on pupils and teachers, the SQA went to scenario 2, which for some courses was publishing additional information on the topics, contexts that would be included in the exam, or the contexts and topics that would not be in the exam. For other courses, they have provided study guides, and for a small number, they are allowing the preparation of a study note to be taken into the exam. For the National 5 Applications of Maths, this has been a list of topics that are not included in the exam. So the exam takes place on the 6th of May, and we know that it's already been shortened down. So paper 1, the non-calculator, will be 50 minutes long. It starts at 9 o'clock and is worth 35 marks. And paper 2, which is the calculator paper, starts at 10:20 and finishes at 12, and that is 55 marks over an hour and 40 minutes. The additional support that has been published includes this list of topics that are not assessed, and we already knew that scale drawing, planning a navigation route and line of best fit were not included, but the additional topics that have been released we can see here are investigating the impact of interest rates on savings and borrowing, constructing, interpreting and comparing scatter graphs and pie charts, calculating mode and range, investigating gradient using coordinates, extracting and interpreting data from compound bar charts, pictograms, stem and leaf diagrams, scatter diagrams or a map, making or justifying decisions based on patterns, trends or relationships in data, and understanding the effects of bias in sample size. So, not a massive list of topics there, but what we're going to do is we're going to go through the course specification for the National 5 applications, and we're going to just take those topics out so that we can clearly see what topics are still in the exam. So our numeracy skills in large haven't been changed very much. Here we've got selecting and using appropriate numerical notation and units, all still in the exam. Selecting and carrying out calculations, pretty much untouched apart from using a ratio and scale drawings, because scale drawings have been taken out, but you still could be expected to calculate ratios. And the reason that these are largely untouched is that your numeracy skills span across pretty much all of the exam there. Most of the topics include numeracy aspects, so to remove these numeracy aspects would greatly impact the other things that are in the exam, so they were never going to really take out the numeracy stuff. Other numeracy skills still in: recording measurements using a scale on an instrument, so a ruler, or reading your scale questions, interpreting measurements and the results of calculations to make decisions, and justifying decisions by using the results of measurements and calculations. So numeracy, fairly the same. The financial skills, again, not huge changes here. So we've still got our analysing a financial position using budget information, analysing and interpreting factors affecting income. So all of your stuff on salaries and national insurance, deductions, everything there is still the same. determining the best deal, so where you're given 3 different products and you need to work out which one's kind of best value for money. That's still there. Converting between several currencies, so your foreign currency, it's still there, including the use of at least 3 currencies in a multi-stage task. So like the ones where you start off in pounds and then you go to a foreign currency and then you spend some of that money and then you go to another country that has a different currency again. You need to change back to pounds and then go to the foreign currency. But you can see there that investigating the impact of interest rates on savings and borrowing has been totally taken out as we were given in that course information. So you won't be asked to look at the interest rates on loans, savings, credit cards, store cards, credit agreements, none of them. Moving on to your statistical skills, quite a few things have been removed here. So we can see that using a combination of statistics to investigate risk and its impact on life has not been removed, so you could be expected to use the link between simple probability and expected frequency. Using a combination of statistical information presented in different diagrams, although that skill hasn't been taken out, scatter graphs and pie charts specifically have, but that leaves constructing, interpreting and comparing box plots. Now the fact that they've not taken out that full section and they've not mentioned box plot makes it quite likely that you're going to have to deal with a box plot in your exam. Using statistics to analyse and compare data sets, again still there, just with mode and range taken out, so you could still be expected to deal with mean and standard deviation, or even your mean and median and interquartile range. So you could, for example, have a box plot question where you're expected to calculate your quartiles and your median there to be able to plot the box plot, or extracting that information and then having to deal with that. And you could have a question where you work out the mean and then the standard deviation. Drawing a line of best fit from given data has been taken out. Now, I've not crossed out data presented in tabular form. This is kind of down to interpretation, so you're not going to get information in a table that you're going to have to draw a line of best fit from. So you're not going to have to draw that scatter graph and deal with that. But you still could technically get information presented in a table that you have to be able to read. So that's the reason for me not crossing that out, just because of interpretation there. Moving on to your measurement skills, calculating a quantity you still need to be able to do, constructing a scale drawing, including choosing a scale, and then planning a navigation course have both been entirely taken out, so we're not going to get asked a question on them at all. Carrying out efficient container packing, still included in there, so they're big questions that you know are going to come up. Using precedence tables to plan tasks, again, nice straightforward kind of question for us to make sure we can do. Solving a problem involving time management, so you could get one of those questions where you have to deal with the time zone and the time intervals. Considering the effects of tolerance is still included. Moving on to your geometry skills, you still need to be able to deal with gradient, just you won't be asked to deal with that as coordinates. You still need to solve a problem involving a composite shape, so where you have parts of a circle and a rectangle, or part of a triangle and a rectangle, or even your composite volumes. Solving a problem involving the volume of a composite solid, there we go. Using Pythagoras Theorem, and that also shows in the explanation there within a 2-stage calculation. So that could be a question where you have to use Pythagoras twice in order to find your answer. Extracting and interpreting data from different graphical forms, so some of this is still here, so you could still be expected to deal with a table with at least 5 categories of information. Charts where all the values are not given or where the scale is not obvious, you could still get asked to do, but the example there is a comparative or compound bar chart, which we know are removed. So you're not going to get those bar charts where it represents 2 different things and you have to compare them. Graphs where part of the axis are missing or the scale is not obvious. For example, the conversion line graph. So you could still get some axes where you need to fill in parts of it, like the scale. Thinking back to the box plot, for example, you could be expected to draw a box plot and for you to fill in the missing parts of the scale there. But I have taken out The last part there, diagrams, for example, pictograms, stem and leaf, scatter diagram, are a map because we know that they are not going to be included from the SQA's information we have been provided. Making and justifying decisions using evidence from the interpretation of data. That section has been taken out, but I've left one of those there, so you can see the making the decisions based on patterns, trends, or relationship within data has been taken out, as is the understanding the effects of bias and sample size. So again, this is kind of down to interpretation. Using evidence from the interpretation of data to justify decisions. So you could still be expected to do this. Making and justifying decisions based on probability. So yeah, probability is still in there. Still need to be able to deal with that in all those different kind of ways. So there's quite a lot of information there to digest as to what is going to be included in the exam. So I've tried to make a more condensed version of all of that information here. So I've got a clear list, breaking it all down into kind of the bigger topics that will be assessed. So first thing we've got there, some basic numeracy skills, rounding, so it could be significant figures, decimal places, seniors, hundred, tens, and so on. Identifying your appropriate units, if it's money, or if it's squared units, or centimetres, or metres, and so on. Your 4 operations, you're expected to be able to multiply, divide, add, and take away in various different questions. Could be decimals, could be whole numbers, could be multiplying or dividing by multiples of 10, 100, and so on. So you need to be quite competent with your numeracy there. BODMAS, always bearing in mind your order of operations. You need to be able to read a scale. You need to be able to make and justify decisions based on measurements or calculations. So an example being the question where you had the thermometer and you were to say whether someone was well enough or not, and you had to answer that question and justify it based on you comparing the temperature in degrees Celsius and degrees Fahrenheit, I think it was. Budgeting, wages, income, deductions, overtime, commission. So you need to be able to deal with all of those. Determining the best deal. So you could have 3 different deals from different shops for the same product, and you're asked which one you should go with because it's the best. So you would need to calculate how much they all cost, and it would be whatever one is the cheapest. Foreign currency, you could be expected to go from pounds to foreign currency and back, and you could get quite big questions on that with lots of parts to them, where you're starting with pounds, you're going somewhere foreign, you're spending so much of the money that you exchange, so you need to work out how much you've got left. Then you need to go to another place, and various different parts to questions could be there, a lot of marks. Graphs and charts, for example, box plots, tables, line graphs, but I've put in brackets there, not scatter graphs, stem and leaf, or pie charts, since we know that they are not going to be included. Mean, standard deviation, median, and interquartile range are all still there. You could get asked to also make justifications from those things, like with your standard deviation questions, where you're given scenario 1, you work out those, and then in scenario 2, you're given the details and you're asked to make comments on the mean and standard deviation. So you would compare the average values, and then you would compare the spread of the data as well with the standard deviation. Calculating a quantity, we've got container packing, precedence tables, time, so it could be on time zones, time intervals, it could be a speed, distance and time question. We've got tolerance there, gradient but not involving coordinates, since we know they're not going to be in the exam. You could have to deal with perimeter, area or volume of shapes or composite shapes. Pythagoras, which could be included in various different questions. So it has appeared in gradient questions, it's appeared in questions involving perimeter. So you need to be able to identify where Pythagoras is being used and be able to competently deal with that to find either the longer side or a shorter side. You need to be able to justify decisions from data that you take from tables or graphs. And you need to be able to deal with probability of an event occurring, or the frequency of something. In percentages, so your appreciation, depreciation, percentage of an amount, reverse percentages, and expressing a quantity as a percentage. So there is our condensed list. I suggest again you take a screenshot of that so that you've got that list there to aid you in your studying. So your next steps are to work through a full past paper timed and under exam conditions, but making sure you're not doing any of the questions that aren't going to be in the exam, which I've got more information on in the next slide. Once you've worked through the past paper, correct that. So get the marking scheme, go through it, correct it as if you're doing the exam. If you're not sure, maybe your teacher could help you. And identify any areas for improvement. So are there topics that you're not getting any marks on whatsoever? They would be a priority to have a look at. Make sure that you're getting those marks. Work on that area. Check to see if anybody's offering supported studies for it in your school or online. Look at the various different resources that I'm going to give you in this video as well. Check to see if they've got any mini lessons on it. They'll have topic specific worksheets that you can work through. Might even be an idea to create and study flashcards. So there's different apps that you can use for that, or you can make paper flashcards for any rules or facts that you tend to forget. So if there's any formulas that aren't on your formula sheet, or maybe it's converting between certain units, maybe you always forget that there's 1,000 millilitres in a litre. These are the kind of things you want to put on flashcards and make sure that you're memorising them. And while on that kind of point, if there is a formula that you know that you're going to forget in that exam, study it before, and the first thing you do when you go in that exam and start the exam is open up the formula sheet and write down that formula that you know you're likely to forget. That way you don't need to panic all through the exam about remembering that. You know, if you come to a question that involves it, you can just flip back to the formula sheet and you've wrote it on there. You can do that. So use that as a strategy for in the exam. And then once you're feeling a bit more confident with those topics that need improvement, go back, do another past paper, do the same thing, time conditions, exam conditions, and then correct it and see if you've improved on your score from the time before. And if you're having trouble with that, then consult your teacher or any of the online resources so that you can make improvements. So on this slide, I've went through all of the past papers. You can see in the top line of the table there, I've got 2019 paper 1, paper 2, in 2018 paper 1, paper 2, and then the specimen paper from 2017. I've put a brief description of what the questions are, and the ones that are greyed out are the ones that you shouldn't be attempting, so the content has been removed entirely for those questions. The ones in yellow are ones where you shouldn't be doing parts of the question, so maybe you're not doing part A but you can do part B, and part B doesn't rely on you having the answer from part A, so you can just go in and do them. So for the 2019 paper 2, I've said do not complete question 7C. You can see that question includes standard deviation, scatter graphs and tables, so 7C must be the part that includes a scatter graph, which you're not meant to do for this year's exam, or won't be in this year's exam, so there's no point in studying it. And then the ones that are in red are the ones where the content has been removed for part of the questions. Now, there's other parts of the question you could still technically be expected to deal with, but in those particular questions, that relies on your answers from the part before. So for that one in 2017 specimen, it's got a stem and leaf, quartiles, box plots. If I remember rightly, part C is to draw the box plot, which you could still get asked to do, but I believe you're supposed to extract the information from either part B or from the stem and leaf diagram. So you would need the answer to do part C. So if you wanted, you could go to the past paper solutions for those questions, get the answers to part A and B, the bits that you're not doing, so that you've got them, and then try part C, knowing that you've got to use that. So there are all of the applications past papers there. You might want to take a screenshot of it. And then I have done the same with the life skills papers. So you see there 2017 life skills paper 1, paper 2, and then all the way down to the 2014 one there. And again, I have colour coded those grey for the ones that have been removed entirely, yellow for the ones that you can do parts of them, and then red for the ones where you could technically be asked to deal with it, but you would need the answers to the parts before. And then the ones that are in white are the ones that you can attempt. So again, you might want to take a screenshot of this to help you with your studying. So here are some online resources that are good to help you with your studying. So we've got the SQA website, first of all, gives you that information on what is in the course and what isn't. You can also get past papers from here. Not very many other resources there though. The second one there, the national5maths.co.uk, has a lot of different resources. They have all the past papers, they have worksheets by topic, you've got exam questions by topic, there's theory guides, practice tests, loads of stuff there. BBC Bite Size website is good for if there's a topic in particular you want to go and have a wee look at. Dynamic Maths have some free resources, so there's a Excel spreadsheet you can go into and it generates questions that you can put your answers into. mathsmut.co.uk has some different resources available through that. mathsrevision.com has mini lessons, so there's PowerPoint lessons. And the last two there offer online supported study sessions on more specific topics. You've got the e-sgoil.com one, and you've got Scholar. Scholar, you'll need your login from school. And Scholar is good because it provides your online sessions, which you can find timetables for, that are ran on various different topics, but also has a whole course kind of facility where you can take mini quizzes and do mini lessons on the various different topics included in the course. So some really good resources there that you want to be using in your studying for any of those topics you identify that you need to improve a bit more on. And that the second one there, the national5maths.co.uk, is quite good for accessing the past papers that are available in the marking schemes that go with them. So now that we know what topics are going to be in our exam, and we've got our strategy for studying, and also we've got those online resources there to consult, as well as the past papers broken down question by question so that we can see which questions we should and shouldn't be attempting. What I'm going to do for the remainder of this video is just focus on a couple of the topics that are commonly ones that pupils struggle with, but are also quite heavy hitters in terms of how many marks you can get. So we're going to focus on specific exam questions. I'm going to provide a bit of extra practice for you to use. So the first topic we're going to focus on is national insurance, and the reason for this is that quite often full marks aren't gained from it because we forget to deal with the fact that everybody has a personal allowance for national insurance or income tax. So John works for the resurfacing company. His annual salary is £17,108. I'm just going to highlight that piece of information there. National insurance is calculated on a person's salary before deductions such as pension contributions. We know that up to £8,424, they're charged 0% national insurance. That's the personal allowance. That's how much you can earn before you have to pay any national insurance. If you earn between 8,424 and 46,384, you pay 12% on your earnings, and then if you earn over 46,384, then you pay 2% on anything that is earned above that. That does not mean you only pay 2% for the whole thing. So we're asked to calculate John's annual national insurance payment. So first of all, John will pay national insurance on anything he earns above £8,424. So we're going to have to work out how much of his wage he's actually going to pay tax on, or national insurance tax. So we're going to do taxable income, and that will be the £17,108, take away the personal allowance of £8,424 there, which when I put in the calculator, I'm getting that his taxable income is £8,684. So that's how much he earns that he's going to have to pay tax on. Now, because his annual salary is £17,108, that falls in this tax bracket here for his national insurance. it means he's only going to pay 12% on those earnings above that 8,424. So we need to work out 12% of 8684. This question is in the paper 2, so the easiest thing would be to do 12% as a decimal, so I'm dividing 12% by 100 to get 0.12, and if I times that by 8684, that'll tell me how much tax John will pay. So 0.12 times by 8684 gives me a tax of £1,042.08 there. And that is my answer to part 1. Part 2 then, John pays 7% of his annual salary into his pension. John's annual income tax is £1,051.60. Calculate John's annual net pay. So the important pieces of information there is he pays 7% into his pension and he has an annual income tax of £1,051.60. And we want to work out his annual net pay. And be wary of the wording here. Sometimes it will ask for the monthly net pay, and so you would have an additional step to work out there. So I'm going to work out his pension first. So his pension is 7% of his annual salary, which is 17,108. And I'm just going to use the same method as I did before. I'm going to do 0.07, because that's what 7% as a decimal would be, and I'm going to times that by 17,108. And so John's pension is £1,197.56. Now we're asked for his annual net pay. We've worked out his pension, we're told what his income tax, we've also worked out his national insurance from the part before. So we're going to have to work out his deductions in total. So his deductions are the pension, the 1197.56, plus his income tax, £1,051.60, plus his national insurance. And the question doesn't mention the national insurance, so you need to be careful that you're also factoring that into his deductions there. So 1197.56 plus 1051.60 plus 1042.08. And that gives me a deduction total of £3,291.24. So then to work out his net pay, all I need to do is take those deductions off of his wage there. So 17,108, take away £3,291.24. And that gives me a net annual pay of £13,816.76 there. So needing to be careful in part 1 that you remember to deal with the personal allowance, and then in part 2 making sure that you're factoring in the national insurance to those deductions as well. So now that we've reviewed the national insurance example, have a try at these two questions. So the first one's from the 2018 paper and the second one from the Specimen National 5 Applications exam paper. Both calculator and both quite similar to what we've just looked at. So remembering to deal with the personal allowance, and for when we deal with the deductions, to deal with the national insurance as well. Pause the video, try these questions, and once you're ready, continue with the video and you'll see the full work solutions. So the next topic I'd like to focus on is container packing. It is not always the best answered questions in the exam. Here we've got books are placed in a box for transport into the bookshops. The dimensions of the book and the internal dimensions of the box are shown in the diagrams. So we can see the book there and its measurements are all in millimetres, and then we can see the boxes and the measurements are in centimetres, and one of them's even in metres, so we need to be wary of those units, which we'll come back to. The books need to be laid with the front cover facing upwards, that's important there, in the boxes. They must all be aligned in the same direction, again that's important. Calculate the maximum number of books that can be packed into each box. So those two parts that I've highlighted there stop me from having too many options here. The books are going to have to be facing upwards with the front cover facing up. So I know that they're not going to be flipped round the other way. They also need to be aligned in the same direction. So I know that I'm going to have every single book facing the same way. Now, they're never going to give you a question that has more than 2, maybe 3 at a push options here for how they're going to be packaged, and they get around that by saying they have to be a specific way up. For you to be able to get all the marks for this question, you have to show that you have considered 2 different ways that these can be packed into the boxes. So before we deal with that, all I'm going to do, because I can see I've got different units here, and that should be immediately making me think I need to deal with that, I'm going to change all of the units into the same consistent unit. Now, because all of the books units are in millimetres, and if I were to turn them into centimetres or metres, it would be decimals, I'm going to keep everything in millimetres. So all of the measurements in the book are fine, so it's the box I'm going to have to change. Now there are 100 centimetres in a metre, so I know that 1 metre is 100 centimetres. And then I know that there are 10 millimetres in a centimetre, so that would be 1,000 millimetres. So this measurement here is 1,000 millimetres. We're at 20 centimetres. I need to times that by 10 to get 200 millimetres. So I've got 200 millimetres here. And then the 50 centimetres, again, I'm going to times by 10 to get 500 millimetres. I've got 500 here. And that just means I'm not going to make any silly mistakes with my units there. So I'm going to imagine my box facing down. And if I place a book in the bottom left hand corner here, where that measurement there is 125 millimetres, and this measurement here is 195 millimetres, where the box is 1,000 millimetres by 500 millimetres. Now this is what we're going to call scenario 1. So in scenario 1, we want to imagine how many books we could fit along that 1,000 millimetres. So all I'm going to do for that is think about that length there. So how many books can I fit lengthwise? How many can I fit along the length? Well, to work that out, because it's 1,000 millimetres, if I divide that by 125, that'll tell me how many books I can fit in along that 1,000 millimetres. So 1,000 divided by 125 is 8. So I'm going to get 8 books all sitting along the way next to each other. Then I want to think about how many rows of those books I'm going to have. What could I fit breadthwise of the box? So how many of those books will fit along that 500 millimetres? So all I'm going to do for that is 500 divided by the breadth of the book, which is 195 millimetres, which is 2.564 and so on. So that's just going to be 2 books. We won't get 0.56 of a book. And then I want to think about how many layers of those books I'm going to have. So I know that I'm going to have 8 rows, I'm going to have 8 books going along the way and 2 rows of them. And then I'm going to figure out how many would fit height-wise So how many could I stack on top of each other to find out the number of layers? So I've got a height of the box of 200 millimeters and the books are all 20 millimeters. So that means I'm going to be able to stack 10 books on top of each other. So there's going to be 10 layers of the 8 rows of 2, or the 2 rows of 8. So to find out the total number of books I could stack in the box in this scenario, I'm going to do my 8 rows of 2 times by my 10 layers. So 8 times 2 gives me 16, times by 10 would be 160 books packed in this first scenario. So then I'm going to look at scenario 2. In scenario 2, we're going to imagine the book has been turned lengthways. And so this measurement here would now be my 195 millimeters. And this measurement here is now my 125 millimeters. So this time, my fit lengthwise, I'm going to work out by doing 1,000 divided by the length of the book, 195 this time. So 1,000 divided by 195 gives me 5.128. So 5 books lengthwise when they're turned on their sides. So then I want to work out how many of them I'm going to fit breadthwise. So how many rows of 5 am I going to have? And I do that by doing 500 divided by 125 this time. So my 500 divided by 125 is going to give me 4. So I've got 5 rows of 4. And then my fit height ways, because the book has to be facing upwards, it's going to be exactly the same. It's still going to be the 200 divided by 20, which is giving me 10 books stacked on top of each other. So my total there, I've got 5 rows of 4 and then 10 layers of those. So 5 times 4 is 20, times by 10 is 200 books. So you can see by turning the books on their side, I'm actually fitting 40 more books into that box, which if you were transporting books for a bookshop, you're running a business. If you can fit more books in to transport, then it's going to cost you less money. So that's an important thing to know, and 40 books is a lot. So calculate the maximum number of books that can be packed into each box. The maximum number of books is 200. And we've proven that. So making sure that you're showing 2 different scenarios there, and you're working through and working out exactly how many books in this case can be packed into that there. Now that we've looked at the example, I want you to try these 2 questions. So pause the video, give them both a try. They're both calculator papers again, and both container packaging questions. Once you've tried them, you can play the video and the full solutions will be worked through. Well, that's all we've really got time for in this video. So to review our learning intentions for this session, we set out to review the SQA revision support for National 5 applications on mathematics for the exam 2022 and to note the key revision areas and topics as specified by the SQA. We looked at the course specification and removed any of the topics that SQA have advised us is not going to be in the exam this year, and we created a condensed topic list which looked like this, where we can see those different topics which we've went through. Reviewing our success criteria, so we said we would be aware of the provided SQA revision support for National 5 applications of maths and areas to be assessed as specified by the SQA, which we've done. I have identified areas and topics that I will focus my revision on, so that topic list there is where you want to start, and we're going to look at those past paper questions. So again, I'll quickly show you those past paper questions and which ones have been removed from the course for this year, so you don't need to practice them. Once again, there are those helpful revision websites.